So, how did your educational background spur your interest in political dramas once you became a screen and TV writer? And how did it lead to The Brink of War?
Ooh, Patrick, right to it. I love it. Great question. So I was history undergrad at Clemson, go Tigers, and so I was always interested in the kind of intersection of history and politics and military affairs and all that kind of stuff. My specialty was actually military special operations, World War II to the present at the time, and so it's kind of an interesting subset of the American foreign policy establishment, and I think that was really the origins of it, and I think I somehow keep falling backwards into these true stories that are, surrounding national security. So that's really it. That's the
All right,
origins.
great. So, you did extensive research into the Reykjavik summit. What little detail in the film do you believe would have never came to light had you not unearthed it, either in research or a deep dive into the transcripts or the interview with Secretary Schultz?
Well, I don't think we would have the visual that was so striking in the film that really struck Schultz of the two nuclear footballs, the two military officers holding those briefcases with all the power to destroy the world right outside the
Interesting.
room.
Hmm.
That was really the image he told me about that I was just thunderstruck by.
Hmm. You made a point early in the film regarding Reagan's knowledge of events, with an aide echoing that one of his strengths is that people underestimated him. How
Mhm.
much of a president's legacy is based on public image, in your opinion, as opposed to the real human beings, flaws and all, that occupy the chair?
Well, I think we can't help but be influenced by public opinion. And I think it takes years, if not decades, of historical work to really unearth all those kind of different nuances.
Right.
And that was something I was really trying to uncover. I was too young to really know or understand Reagan. My first memory of a president really starts with H.W. Bush. That was my first little kid kind of formative, oh, that's the
Right.
president kind of
Right.
moment. And so for me, it was about uncovering all this kind of stuff. And that was the thing you referenced specifically is another thing that Schultz mentioned. He
Ah.
said, well, he was an actor. He memorized scripts, and so he would memorize whole briefing books.
Ah.
And these analysts and aides would come in to brief him and be all excited they get to brief the president, and then turns out the president already read the briefing book. So
Interesting. That's something I didn't know.
yeah.
So, one of the things that impressed me about your collaboration with Jeff Daniels was how much of the humanity of Reagan he was able to put
Mm.
to the forefront of the character. What adjustments did you make to the structure of the story based on what Daniels wanted to imbue in his interpretation?
Well, credit to Jeff, he didn't change a word of the script.
Oh, okay.
He came to it and really brought himself into that character. And so I had written it and he came in and we started talking about it and he has this kind of I would call it old-fashioned American sense of civility and that kind of humanity and cheerfulness I think that Reagan had, moral clarity that Reagan had. I think
Uh-huh.
he just has, he's in Mockingbird and he's in,
Right, right.
all these kinds of things that we think of as that kind of old fashioned. You can see him being in our town, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that kind of thing. So he's really that guy.
I have to ask you, were the nightmares and the kind of palsy in his hand
Mhm.
based on maybe his early dementia, or were you going for something else?
No, I what I was going for is trying to find a visual representation for how he talked to people about how the assassination attempt affected him. And so I
Ah,
was trying to figure out how do you convey that visually? And so that was really it.
interesting. Sort
Yeah.
of a PTSD thing, right?
Yeah, correct.
In the framework of a film, it's often difficult to know an antagonist like Mikhail Gorbachev, but Jared Harris was able to bring out an ideologue and a human being at the same time. What was your goal for Gorbachev as you approached the story you wanted to tell? And again, how much adjustment was made through the research?
Well, I wanted to figure out what made Gorbachev tick. It's really I think we view him as this kind of saintly figure now in the West
Right,
historically.
right.
But it was really great to have so many people from the Eastern Bloc. Our Polish cinematographer spent most of her formative years in, behind the wall in Poland. And so here we are on set with Jared Harris, who's playing Gorbachev, and we're talking about him, as this kind of saintly figure. And she goes, "Well, hang on a second. You mean the guy that like was in charge of the KGB and still sending people to the gulag when I was a kid?
Right, right.
Let's pause for a second. Let's examine that."
Right.
So I think, it was really good for the actors to hear that, to hear a different perspective than what we have in the West.
Yeah. Well, her cinematography was excellent. Was it her?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Magdalena, she's amazing.
Her cinematography was fantastic and used Iceland to the highest level.
Yeah.
So you interviewed George Shultz regarding the summit, using him as an example. What are powerful people like past their expiration date? Do they want to tend to lionize their moment or be more truthful about it?
In his case, I think he wanted to be more truthful about it. I think he was the one. There's this kind of moment that happens in the end of the film. J.K. Simmons, who plays him, we give this moment to him. But he had this very human moment. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding on the American side about what Reykjavik really represented, what this moment in Iceland represented.
Yeah,
And it was Gorbachev who got there first. It was Gorbachev who understood what it meant first. And, even years later, when Schultz asked him, when we met, it was the coldest, most dangerous moment. And then 3 years later, it's over. And what happened? And Gorbachev is the one who says Reykjavik. Gorbachev is the one who understood that being in that room, that was the moment. That was when he and Reagan formed a relationship. And I think
right.
later a friendship, but at that moment, a relationship.
Very interesting. What was behind the decision to bring the leaders' wives into the picture, contrasting Reza and Nancy Reagan? What were you allowing them to symbolize beyond the power brokerage of the summit?
Well, the first thing it does is, from a character standpoint, is humanize the two men, right? It
Sure.
makes them husbands, right,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
not just leaders of the world. And I think the other thing that does is it has the virtue of being true. These women really did
Right,
hate one another, and
right.
they were representing these two different systems. And Patrick, the final thing that I would really say is that I wanted to include them because we ask a lot of these women. The
Yeah,
first lady's office is not a publicly paid position. Her office isn't publicly paid for. You have to raise private donations to pay for it. And yet
right.
we ask her to represent America. So we're asking a lot of them.
Interesting. I Hope Davis was incredible as Nancy. I
Oh,
have to say, I'd like to see a whole movie of her playing
yeah.
Nancy Reagan. Just she understood her immediately. I was
Yes.
so impressed. So I was a fan of the newsroom. With so
Yeah.
much changing since the fairy tale of that series, how do you
Mhm.
think it would play out today with so many people choosing to believe the media of whatever makes them comfortable in their worldview, even if it means eschewing reality?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to go ask Aaron, but I don't know that Aaron Sorkin would would say he'd do anything differently. I think,
Right. Okay.
he made Will McAvoy a Republican. He chose Jeff
Right.
Daniels to play him. I
Right.
think he made a lot of choices that were very prophetic, if I may, about the media landscape that we're living
Sure.
in. And I think that I don't know, and knowing Aaron a little bit, I would say I don't know if he'd change probably a thing about what he
That,
was doing.
that's very interesting. Finally, why do you think it's important for audiences to see your film, and what type of discussion would you want to come out of it?
I want everybody to see this movie and come out with hope that as divided as we are, that we can reach across the aisle, that we can reach across our communities, our Thanksgiving tables, and try to find a way to make a better, safer world. And look, it's a true story that I think most people have never heard of.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a chance for us all to see something we've never seen and riveting performances from these guys.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2026.